In today's episode of Forecast Lab, Hurricane Beryl, the earliest Category 5 storm on record. We're going to do our technical discussion coming up in a few minutes. Also, record-breaking heat in the southwestern U.S. this weekend, and we'll also mention the winner of last week's Geo Guesser. But first, let's go over the weather around the country. Starting to see the appearance of that heat in the southwestern U.S., a large area of 100s all the way from Tucson up to Page, over to the San Joaquin Valley, Redding and Red Bluff up to 103. And we've even got 103 that looks like maybe Ukiah, California. And that heat will be getting worse as we head into the weekend. Now, looking at the general weather pattern, what I like to do is look at the air masses. We've got one large Pacific air mass across the northwestern U.S., a modified continental air mass north of Missouri, Kansas, up into Minnesota, and down to the south are tropical air. And we can look at the dew point temperatures. 77 at Little Rock, that's very muggy air. 75 at I think that's going to be Fort Polk, and this wide area of 70s dew points going all the way to just south of Des Moines up to Detroit, and pretty much right in that corridor right there. So this is all the very muggy tropical air infiltrating the southeastern region. In the northeastern states, another Canadian cold front moving through Ontario, approaching Toronto, and pretty much positioned right around Detroit. We have a slight risk of severe thunderstorms from the Storm Prediction Center in the Ohio River Valley, and a few of those storms already going up south of Indianapolis over to Columbus. Looking good throughout the rest of the Northeast. You can see it's pretty much devoid of low cloud, but heat advisories starting to sneak up the Ohio River Valley. Charleston expecting a heat index of 100 degrees today, Cincinnati 102, and Louisville 109. And those are heat indexes, not air temperatures. The southeastern U.S. looking very much like the depths of summer. Thunderstorms all the way from Florida up to southern Georgia and over into the Mississippi River Valley. And we do pick up the heat advisories. Those extend from Athens to Tallahassee and extend westward, covering Atlanta, Huntsville, Birmingham, Pensacola, and Mobile. And as we move west into Mississippi, it gets much worse, and we start picking up the excessive heat warnings. And that includes Jackson, Mississippi, Memphis, Shreveport, Texarkana, and Little Rock. And there you go. You can check out some of those surface plots. Pretty close to 100 degrees from Little Rock to Memphis, and those dew points way up there near 75. Typically in a late summer heat wave, we see the dew points fall off a little bit into the upper 60s or around 70 due to upper level subsidence, but not with this event. It remains very sultry, a little bit of a break from the heat in central Mississippi. Hundreds all across Texas, but some relief is on the way from up north and from down south, and we'll cover that in a bit. Going into the southwestern desert areas, the monsoon starting to relax a little bit. We see the dew points have fallen off into the 40s and 50s. 52 at Albuquerque, 59 at El Paso, and 57 at Tucson. And with that, a corresponding decrease in the precipitation field. Some of the heavier activity from Truth or Consequences over to Globe and Safford. Some heavy storms around the Trinidad, Walsenburg area right in here, near the Sangre de Cristos, and some other activity further up north, closer to that baroclinic zone, all the way from Valentine, Nebraska, down to Akron, Colorado. And you can watch all this activity come together. The first round in the Nebraska Panhandle, and other showers and storms coming out of the higher elevations of Colorado. So some very spectacular development as we get that surface heating, and that brings us to our very last frame. Severe thunderstorm watches all the way from Rapid City right down the high plains of Colorado. The heat wave has already started in the southwest. Today, the Weather Service has a high of 111 for Sacramento. Only seeing 102 at the Sour. We see 106 at Bakersfield and 110 all the way from Blythe to Las Vegas. And it is going to get much hotter as we go into the weekend. We'll look at that shortly. And up in the northwestern U.S., excessive heat warnings are posted across western and northern Oregon and on up into the Washington interior for Thursday through Tuesday. One very last nice day with temperatures in the 70s and 80s, but those readings are going to come way up tomorrow and even worse for Friday. And lots of showers and storms in Montana back behind that frontal system. You can see down to the south we've got 80 at Lander, Wyoming. And further north, it drops off rapidly into the upper 50s and 60s in Yellowstone Park and a wide area of 50s and 60s in Montana. That would be so amazing to be experiencing that right now. Instead, here in Texas, 100s. Let's take a look up in Alaska. Lots of showers and clouds throughout the interior of Alaska. Temperatures have come down about 20 to 30 degrees as a new round of polar air makes its way into the interior. Yesterday up in Beryl, they had 0.41 inch of rain, breaking a record for the date. Totals were up to 2 to 4 inches in the Brooks Range, and we're looking for another 1 to 2 inches on the north slope this weekend. Good to know if you're heading up there for a vacation. All right, you can check out that surface map. I'm not really too sure about the location of that front. It could very well be out a little bit further ahead, but further to the east. That's a large chunk of polar air. Temperatures have been running below normal with that active Hudson Bay pattern, and with that, the usual incursion of cold air down into the prairies. Heading on down south, looking at Hurricane Beryl. At 5 p.m. Eastern, winds were steady at 140 miles an hour in the storm. That makes it a mid-range Category 4. The pressures have come way up to 959 millibars. That filling is usually associated with weakening, and it is heading into an area of higher shear, which we'll look at shortly. Now, the eye is filled with clouds, so this is not a very classic look for a very strong storm, but that's going to be the eye right there, passing about 10 to 20 miles south of the Jamaican coast, and that storm surge, the eye wall, the stronger winds, all of that heavily affecting this populated area. That's where most of the towns and cities are located, so not very good news for them. I think the people there will be mostly okay, but I will be very concerned about power outages, disruptions to the water supply. They could be pretty hard hit from those effects. Now, for whatever reason, Jamaica does not have a functioning radar that I can find. They were supposed to be getting a radar installed a few years ago. I'm not sure what happened, but we can look at it with the Cuban radar. That's going to be the eye right there, just south of the southwestern coast of Jamaica, and you can see that inner eye wall grazing the southern coast of the island. Now, checking out the intensity, we use the Dvorak scheme, which is what this image is, and the process probably a little bit too complicated to discuss here, but what we see here is an annular look to the colder cloud tops. You can see this area of black with a colder area of white, and right in here, that's the discontinuity associated with the eye. So what we see here, this is pretty typical of a Category 3 to Category 4 storm. The Dvorak curve is a little bit hard to read, so we can supplement this with the classic thermal imagery. This is infrared. This is a presentation of the temperature of the cloud tops. And you may look at this and you'll think, you can see the spiraling appearance, you can see the eye. But one of the things that I look for here is the trend in the overall temperatures. So if we go back to the very beginning, about 5 hours ago, there's a lot of black around the center of that circulation. And gradually, over time, it's replaced with the warmer reds and oranges. And that points to a weakening of the overall structure. And that's partly due to the enhanced shear over that area, and also due to the frictional interactions with the island of Jamaica. That's a pretty large island, and that's certainly going to have some effect on the dynamics in that storm. So what is in store? These are some charts that do not exist anywhere that I'm aware of. I put these together here in-house, and this shows you the detrimental effects. We call this the detrimental effects chart. The blue, these bands right here and up here, those are areas of high bulk shear from 850 to 200 millibars. Values over 20 to 30 knots, those are shaded, and those are going to rip a hurricane apart. Also, we have brown areas. Those correspond to dry air in the mid-levels of the troposphere, 850 to 700 millibars. That's another detrimental issue. Now, this is going to advect to the northeast, and that'll be out of the picture, so dry air is not going to be a concern, but the shear, yeah, that'll definitely have an effect. This is 7 p.m. You can see it's heading right into that band of 40 to 50 knot shear, which is definitely not very good for any strengthening. So we're going to see the storm either remain steady or it will go into decline. As we go into tomorrow night, still hanging on to 30s and 40s, we need to examine that at a distance away from the storm since it does have an effect on the surroundings. But there it is, crossing the Yucatan. There's another area of shear out in the Gulf, so that's going to be another problem. NHC is only looking for Category 1 out there in the Western Gulf for the time being, and the GFS track taking it right into the Brownsville and Matamoros area. Now, I've seen a lot of posts on social media where people will post these spaghetti plots that show absolutely every storm track, and that's a very bad way to forecast. There's a lot of statistical models that are not very reliable. Those should not just be thrown onto a map like this. There's also a lot of models with poor skill that don't belong on there either. So I'm going to show you how to assemble these properly and look at them exactly as a experienced forecaster would. So let's take a look at that track. I've got 3 primary ones on here. This yellow is going to be the official NHC forecast. The red is the GFS forecast. That's one of the best models for forecasting tropical cyclone motion. And the purple is the interpolated motion, which is corrected for unforeseen movement in the storm earlier today. So that's kind of a corrected GFS track. Here we've added the GFS ensembles. These are run at slightly lower resolution, and they're run with differing initial conditions. They use an algorithm called the Ensemble Transform Bread Vector, which is designed to exploit the differences in the models where they're coming up with different solutions. And those are just fed into the initial states for these ensembles, and we get a variety of different tracks. And one of the things that we look for is the clustering. So right in here, this is the most likely statistical area for the track to move through, and these are going to be outliers on each end. So not as likely to head into the deep Gulf of Mexico or into the Bay of Campeche, although there's probably about 5 or 6 outliers in that area. There's the mean track of those ensemble members. That's going to be the blue line right here. And you can see it does diverge to the right from the track of the deterministic GFS, which is run at higher resolution. Okay, so we're starting to build up some useful information on how the models are doing. Now I've added the track variable consensus models. This is kind of an integration of different high-performance models. There's different mixes, and what I've got here is the thin lines showing those tracks, and they're very close to the official forecast and the GFS as well. These tend to be very accurate, although not all the time. Here we have the HWRF. This is the NOAA Hurricane Forecast Model. You can see that that is going a little bit to the right of the GFS track. This tends to be a fairly good model, although it's not outstanding. It's had significant errors in the past, but it is noteworthy. It's taken it to the right of most of the tracks that we're seeing so far. Here's the Hurricane Analysis and Forecast System. This is due to replace the HWRF, HMON as well, and those are going to the left of the track. So a little bit of a difference there. And there's the NavGem model. This is run by the U.S. Navy. It has had varying success. I'm still kind of piecing it together to see how well these models do. With Hurricane Ida, it did pretty well. And we can see that the track is going pretty far to the right, all the way up towards Victoria and Houston. And there's the UK Met model showing a left bias. This is the British Global Spectral Model. And it appears we do not get the European model in that lineup, so we have to go to Pivotal Weather. I guess Europe is back to those awful data restrictions, but we can check it out. Looks like that track is pretty close to the GFS, just south of Matamoros. So a range of different possibilities coming up for this weekend and early next week. Hopefully that'll give you some information to look at. Let's take a look at the forecast. This is the GFS model. We go into tonight, looks like a lot of thunderstorm activity across Kansas. And then going into Thursday, this is how things look early in the afternoon. More cold air coming down through the Central Plains, so cooling off in that part of the country. There will be a slight risk of severe thunderstorms from the Ozarks down towards Tulsa and up towards Kansas City. Wind will be the main problem. Also could be some thunderstorms further north in southeastern Minnesota and northeastern Iowa. Large hail could be a possibility there. Then as we go into Thursday night and into Friday, there's how we're looking during the afternoon. That cold air continues to sweep into the Midwest and down into the Red River region of Texas. We're looking for a marginal risk of severe thunderstorms for the upper Ohio River Valley, pretty close to this warm sector. That's going to include Akron, Huntington, Lexington. Could see damaging wind gusts there, either along this warm front or ahead of this cold front. In the southern plains, temperatures dropping substantially with that cold front, down to 89 Friday from 101 on Thursday. Dallas dropping from 101 down to 93. And Friday is when the heat peaks in the southern deserts. This region right here, it's going to be 121 degrees at Palm Springs, 115 at Yuma, and 108 at Tucson. Then we go into Friday night and Saturday. Lots of storms there in Mexico. The monsoon receding down to the south. There's the map for Saturday afternoon. Looking for a lot of heat there in Oregon, up to 105 at Portland, 102 at Pendleton, and Medford up to 113 degrees for Saturday. The record all-time is 115. Also very hot in the California deserts, up to 117 there at Barstow. Palmdale expecting at least 7 days of 110-degree temperatures. That would break the 3-day streak of 110-degree temperatures by quite a margin. Then we go into Sunday. The heat continues. Looking for 103 at Tonopah. When I worked there at the Tonopah test range, never saw above 100 degrees. The all-time record at Tonopah Airport is 105. Then we go into Monday. Even more heat in the deserts. You can see that hurricane there coming on shore. This was the 6Z run, so this is a little bit outdated. I think the GFS has taken it a little bit far south, but anyway, you can check that out. Meanwhile, out in the southwestern region, Las Vegas expecting 118 degrees. That would set an all-time record. Phoenix will be up to 116. That will be below the all-time record of 122. In the mountains, very hot weather, Show Low up to 92, and Flagstaff 91. Then just very quickly through the rest of the week, looks pretty wet there for Texas. The Weather Prediction Center, QPF's going up to 2 to 3 inches across much of East and South Texas. And there's the rest of the week. Looks like they're bringing a second tropical storm or hurricane into East Texas, so we'll certainly watch that. And for that Earth Sciences Geo Guesser from Wednesday, yes, that is Carlsbad, New Mexico. In 1994, June 27th, they reached their all-time high temperature for the state and also the highest temperature ever observed east of the Rockies. That was 122 degrees. The winner, MN Medic Joe, guessed within 1 hour. I guess I'm going to have to turn up the difficulty here because that was solved pretty quickly. Anyway, Medic Joe, contact us on the Weather Graphics contact page to set up your free copy of Weather Forecasting Red Book. And that will close out our Wednesday edition of Forecast Lab. Just as a reminder, if you're a regular viewer and you enjoy this program, please consider supporting us on our Patreon website. There's the link for that, or you can head to weathergraphics.com and pick up a book or some software, and that will help us out as well. Okay, hope you have a great rest of your Wednesday. Take care, and we will see you back here in a couple days. Bye-bye.